food, transportation, heating, and cooling. Last time I discussed what Bill Gates calls green premiums. A green premium is the cost difference between traditional products and their zero or low carbon alternatives. I estimated, for instance, the green premium of a Chevy Bolt is about $50,000 relative to a Honda Fit. I also briefly discussed the global emissions caused by electricity, steel, concrete, plastics, and fertilizer production. Gates argued that we need to figure out a way of decreasing the green premiums attached to them, especially electricity. Today I will eventually cover transportation, heating, and cooling, and briefly touch on urban development. But before we go there, I want to revisit something I discussed already: fertilizers. Fertilizers are like the tip of an iceberg. The iceberg being agriculture, which is responsible for about 20% of our net emissions. This includes plant agriculture for human consumption, livestock raised for meat and dairy, and crops that are used to make biofuel. Eating plants is by far the most efficient way of getting our nutrition. Indeed, of all the land we use for agriculture, plants grown for human consumption make up less than a quarter. Growing plants for human consumption is, however, still inherently dirty. This is because, remember, we are stuck with the Haber process that is used to produce synthetic fertilizers. The Haber process uses fossil fuels and generates carbon dioxide. Yet, it is much better than eating most animals, which make up 77% of all agricultural land and produce only 18% of available calories. Here I said eating plants is better than eating most animals because there are outliers like mealworms, crickets, and roadkill. From here on, I will ignore these outliers and focus on livestock. Raising animals like pigs and cows take up a lot more land per calorie than plants that can be eaten by humans. Although exact figures vary depending on the setup and the kind of animal raised for food, animal agriculture is also much more water intensive than most forms of plant agriculture. Finally, raising animals generates a lot more greenhouse gases than growing the nutritional equivalent in plants. The increased demand on land drives another destructive process: deforestation. Every year, an area of forest the size of Italy is cleared by humans and turned into farmland to feed livestock. This not only removes natural carbon sinks, but also affects how reflective the surface is to sunlight. This reduction in albedo intensifies climate change. Water is also a big issue. As the climate changes, some areas are becoming drier. Animal agriculture strains dwindling freshwater supply even more. By some areas, I mean most places where humans live and raise livestock. The upshot is, in the coming decades, it might become much harder to sustain the increased demand on meat and dairy. Finally, significantly increased greenhouse emissions are a big deal. The world population is expected to reach 10 billion by 2050. If the current trends in increased demand on meat continue, this will add another 10 billion tons of CO2 equivalent to our greenhouse gas balance sheet. Some respond to this by arguing that we should all become vegan. Bill Gates thinks that this is infeasible. He even provides a little argument for his skepticism. Meat and dairy play too important a role in human culture. Culture cannot be transformed within the timescales relevant to addressing climate change. Therefore, Gates concludes, global veganism is infeasible as a part of a solution to climate change. The first premise is plausible. I was, for instance, raised Muslim, and animal sacrifice is an important ritual in Islam. It is so important that if I were to go to the people of my hometown and tell them we should all stop killing and eating animals to save the planet, they would think I am out of my mind. But then again, humans are extremely flexible creatures. When they have to adapt, they do adapt. Consider, for instance, how fast we adapted to the global pandemic in 2020. If a clear crisis presents itself, most people will change their ways. So I suspect that the second premise of Gates' argument against global veganism is not as solid as he thinks it is. But more important, what do you think? Do you agree with Gates that veganism at a global scale is a pie in the sky? Gates, however, isn't completely dismissive of the role of human diet when it comes to combating climate change. In fact, like many other things, he thinks that technology is going to be the savior here. First of all, there are plant-based meat and dairy substitutes. These are all familiar to most people who live in the urban areas of Western countries like the United States. Although these substitutes are typically a bit pricier than the real thing, they are affordable to the middle class and wealthy folks. Besides, at least some of them are quite decent in emulating the flavor and texture of certain kinds of meat. Then there is the lab-grown meat, which is exactly what it sounds like. It is real meat grown in a lab from animal cells. Right now, lab-grown meat is prohibitively expensive for all but the richest. For instance, as of the publication of this video, a pound of lab-grown beef costs about 10,000 US dollars. The key question, therefore, is where the price is headed to. Will it remain stable, or will it decline substantially? Here, there's a debate between optimists and skeptics. Some, such as the nonprofit Good Food Institute, predict that the price will come down substantially in the next 10 years and become cheaper than real meat. On the other hand, some accuse the optimists of wishful thinking and not understanding the scientific and engineering challenges on the way. They believe that lab-grown meat will never become cheap enough to present a serious alternative to real meat and plant-based substitutes. Besides, lab-grown meat might not be a low-emission product. We have no way of reliably estimating the net emissions of a product until it is made at scale for consumption. In case you are interested in the subject, I'm linking 2 articles in the video description. And then there is biofuel agriculture. One popular kind of biofuel is ethanol, which is made from corn, sugar cane, or sugar beet. This is happening as we speak. Indeed, if you have a gasoline car that was made in the last 25 years, you are most likely using E10, which is a 10% ethanol, 90% gasoline blend. Another biofuel is biodiesel, which is produced from soybean, palm, sunflower, or similar plant-derived oils. Biofuels have the potential to reduce emissions because, in theory, we can use the energy the plant absorbs from the sun and keep recycling the carbon dioxide back into the plant every time we grow crops to make new biofuel. So, in theory, it is just a biological method of carbon capture with a perk. We get energy out of it. How much of that potential is used, however, depends on the manufacturing process. We have to use fertilizers which are made from fossil fuels, for instance. We need fuel to harvest the crop and transport it to the refinery where it will be turned into biofuel. We need electricity to heat or cool the fermentation tanks or run the refinement towers. These issues raise concerns about whether or not biofuels are really zero or even low carbon. Indeed, there is reason to believe that some, if not most, biofuels are grossly carbon-positive products that are even worse than fossil fuels. What's more, some argue that modern agriculture is an inherently destructive process. Fertilizers that wash away into waterways, seas, and oceans cause massive amounts of pollution. Finally, every plant-based calorie that is used to produce fuel is a calorie that doesn't enter the global food market. The demand for corn-based ethanol and soy-based biodiesel, for instance, decrease global food supply and consequently increase global food prices. This effect might not hurt affluent nations and individuals too much, but it is literally a death sentence to many among the global poor. Next, there is transportation. which is almost entirely dependent on fossil fuels, save for the small amounts of biofuels I mentioned earlier. Most cars and trucks, for instance, burn diesel or gasoline, and as Gates points out, electric cars are still a niche. In spite of sizable efforts to incentivize them, only about 2% of new car sales are electric. Similarly, air travel is completely dependent on fossil fuels, mostly jet fuel. And finally, most ships burn fossil fuels. You might be thinking, why not electric? With cars, the answer probably has to do with the infrastructure. Charging stations aren't as common as gas stations. Home charging also has issues. Most people don't live in single-family homes where they can park and charge their cars overnight. Even when they can, the existing electrical setup in someone's house might not support charging. It might cost thousands of dollars to make the necessary conversions to add a charging station to a home garage. There are also the green premiums attached to electric cars. Even a relatively affordable car such as a Chevy Bolt is much more costly than a comparable car with an internal combustion engine. Most consumers simply don't want to pay tens of thousands of dollars just to do their part for the environment. But with trucks, the difficulty is not the consumers. It is the simple arithmetic of fuel capacity and range. Think about the much hyped Tesla Semi. Why can't we replace all or most 18-wheelers with them? The answer is an electric truck with the same range as a diesel truck will have to carry about 20 tons of batteries. By law, in the United States, an 18-wheeler cannot be heavier than 36 tons. This upper limit includes the cargo. Therefore, a Tesla Semi cannot even carry half the cargo as a diesel Semi. On top of that, there are again infrastructure problems and lost service time. Fast charging a car battery takes about 45 minutes, although it degrades the batteries and is not recommended. Fast charging a truck battery would take significantly longer or will require a special setup with multiple chargers. Given the massive shortage of freight capacity, no freight company would like the idea of taking a mandatory 4-hour break every 10 hours of operations. And of course, the math only gets worse the bigger the vehicle gets. That's why Gates thinks that advanced biofuels are the only plausible path forward for large vehicles such as trucks, planes, and ships. He even condenses his solution for the climate impact of transportation. Electrify when you can, use alternative fuels for everything else. What do you think? Does his motto sound plausible? Next, there's the matter of heating and cooling the spaces we live and work in. This too is non-negligible. 7% of net emissions come from heating and cooling of houses and businesses. What makes the situation much worse is the global trend. As you can see, the overwhelming majority of the houses in India and Indonesia, as well as Africa, don't have air conditioners. Therefore, as these places become more affluent, the climate impact of air conditioning will increase substantially. According to Gates, by 2050, we will use 4 times the amount of electricity we now use for air conditioning. Heating is also a problem. Because electricity is easier to decarbonize than fossil fuels, one goal here is to increase electric heating. Another goal, however, is to increase the efficiency of heaters so that they don't have to use up so much energy. You might be familiar with this problem if you ever try to heat a space in a cold climate with an electric heater. Most electric heating is inefficient. Efficient electric heating is often expensive. To make electric heating efficient, one needs to install high-end heating systems with hefty green premiums. Sometimes even this is not enough. To increase the efficiency of electric heating, sometimes the space to be heated needs to be designed accordingly or be remodeled if it is already built. Let me give you one example. I live somewhere up north where winters are long and harsh. but I have a natural gas boiler that heats my house pretty well. If I want to replace it with another gas boiler, it will cost less than $2,000. Plus, it will be an easy install. We just need to take the old one out and put a new one in. Electric boilers that can match our old capacity, however, are in the $10,000 range. What's more, you'll have to get a new electrical box because our old box cannot support the current demand of the electrical boiler. All in all, we would probably have to part ways with $20,000 to make a switch. Besides, gas boilers are as durable as rock. Mine is from the 70s. It still works without a hitch. Electric boilers come with a 5-year warranty, and after that, you're on your own. To add insult to injury, gas is still substantially cheaper than electricity in most areas. So even the fanciest electric boiler might not be as cheap to operate as the least efficient gas boiler. So for most consumers to make the switch to efficient electric heating, the green premiums must come down substantially. But even that might not be enough in some cases. Again, think about my own case and compare it to others. I'm the owner. I pay my own heating bill. If electric heating becomes cheaper and reliable enough, I will switch. I might hold a PhD in a useless field, but I'm not that stupid. But suppose I weren't the owner. Suppose I were just renting. That would remove all the incentive to make a switch. Because realistically, a switch would pay for itself after several years, maybe after a decade. But I'm just renting, and I'm likely to move within a few years. So why would I spend thousands of dollars to make a switch that will not pay for itself within the time frame I will be renting? And why would the owner care about paying for the switch? She wouldn't, because the renter pays the monthly bill. In other words, governments should subsidize owners switching to greener heating. Another venue overlaps with architecture and urban design. Most of our buildings and cities aren't designed to be energy efficient. There is much room for improvement here. The challenge is not just to maximize energy efficiency, however. It is also making the spaces cheap enough to build and maintain, and comfortable to live in and work in. Otherwise, people aren't going to want them or be able to afford them. To sum up, according to Bill Gates, food production and consumption must become vastly more efficient. Transportation must become electrified or transition to advanced biofuels. Heating and cooling must become electrified as much as possible. And we should invest in more efficient building designs. This brings me to the end of this lecture. Send me a message if you have any questions. Thank you for your patience, and I'll catch you next time.